Hello, everybody, and welcome to this session on the rise of creative AI and its ethics. I'm Jennifer, and I'm very happy to present to you Philippe Pasquier, who will be speaking with us today for the next half hour. First off, a little bio. Philippe Pasquier is an associate professor in Simon Fraser University School for Interactive Arts and Technology in Vancouver, where he directs the Meta Creation Lab for Creative AI. Philippe leads a research creation program about generative systems for creative tasks. As such, he's a scientist specialized in AI, artificial intelligence, a multidisciplinary artist, an educator, and a community builder. His contributions range from theoretical research in multi-agent systems, computational creativity, creative AI, and machine learning, to applied artistic research and practice in digital art, computer music, as well as interactive and generative art. Hi, Philippe.
Hello, Jennifer. Thank
Welcome with
you.
us. I will let you do the next 20-25 minutes. I invite people as well, if they have questions, to put them in the chat, and I'll be able to ask you them at the end. So the floor is yours. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks. Hello, bonjour. Today I'm going to talk to you about the rise of creative AI and its ethics. I'm a faculty at SFU and I lead the Meta Creation Lab there. I'm trained as a computer scientist and do research in AI. And in the lab, we really focus on creative AI. So I want to introduce that. And first, I want to say, each time I talk to a general audience about AI, I want to say there's two types of AI. There's strong AI and weak AI. Strong AI is this idea of having sentient, intelligent machine. And I want to be extremely clear. This is scientific research and there's research around it, but we have no idea how intelligence works for human, and we don't know how to do that for machines at all. And so what I'm going to talk about in the rest of this talk is not the strong AI that is talked a lot in the media and is raising some fears and is for now just science fiction. I'm going to talk about the actual AI we have for now, which is just weak AI, this idea of automating particular tasks. And in that sense, AI is becoming ubiquitous. It's everywhere. You know, it's doing translation on the phone for us. It's doing finding the shortest path on a Google map. It's playing chess and Go and all sorts of games these days. But each of those AI systems does only one task at a time. And my research and what we do at the Meta Creation Lab, and that's really the idea of creative AI, is to use AI and machine learning to automate those tasks that are creative tasks. And what do we mean by creative tasks? So that's just simply tasks for which there's no best outcome. When you do like the Google map best road for fastest path to go from A to B, there is such a thing as a best solution. When you play chess, there is such a thing as a winning move and a losing move. When you diagnose, the automatic diagnosis with AI, there is such a thing as, a good diagnosis in medicine and something that is not the case. But for creative tasks, there's no such thing as best outcome. So it makes AI algorithm and machine learning more complex to apply for those particular tasks. So we're looking at graphic design, music composition, drawing, painting, animation, narrative, poetry, jokes, recipe. And in a way, creative task and the generation of creative asset is one of the main use of computer in the modern world. And AI and machine learning is a little bit behind in being applied to those particular tasks. And that's what we do at the Meta Creation Lab. In particular, we use a lot of machine learning to do what we call style imitation, which is this idea that you have a set of examples, usually human-made, let's say a set of human composition, music composition, and then you're going to have the machine learning a model and generate new composition in the style of what is being trained on. And once you have this style imitation machine in a given domain, then you can do style interpolation, style combination, style transformation, moving from one style to another, extending a style, etc., etc. And that's really what we focus on at the Meta Creation Lab. We do both the scientific research and industrial applications, as well as artistic creation with the algorithms when they work. So today I want to talk about two types of creative AI that is really rising, that is happening increasingly everywhere, and has going to have big impact on our society moving forward. And there's two really broad contexts and type of systems in creative AI. And I'll take a few examples from the Meta Creation Lab's research just to give you an idea of what those two types of context are like. The first context I'm going to talk about is computer-assisted creativity, this idea of embedding creative AI and extending or augmenting existing software with AI and machine learning. Right now, creating creative assets manually is just a matter of clicking on buttons in Photoshop, in Illustrator, in InDesign, in Pro Tools if you're doing sound, in After Effects, and you have to click your way through as a creator, and nothing is pretty much automated, and we want to change that, and there's a lot happening in that space. So that's the human operator interacting with AI within a software. The second type of approach is embedded generative system, where the creative AI algorithms are actually in the system generating content in real time to generate the right content for the right moment for a particular user at a given time. And so we'll see examples of that in games, in interactive systems, and installation and artworks in which the system has to generate content in real time. So let's start with computer-assisted creativity, sometimes referred to as co-creativity in the academic world. And I'll take an example, a recent example. We've been working on this type of systems for almost 2 decades now, but recently we have some of the state-of-the-art computer-assisted composition system that we've been working on. So I'm going to introduce first to you this model called the multi-track music machine. And you see it's a model that changed completely the way composers work, in the sense that you make requests to the AI algorithm about adding tracks, removing tracks, changing some bars, changing some material. You make requests to the AI system, is making the actual composition of the various notes that you want, and you interact with the system, regenerating part of your composition until you're satisfied. So let's look at a little demo video of the system here. All right, so that's an example of a computer-assisted creative AI algorithm. In this case, it's a new deep learning model that is trained on more music than we can listen to in our lifetime. It's a transformer model, and it's a very good composer. And the way it works, as you've seen in the video, is that you can just use your own composition or existing composition and very easily make variations and remix. You can add new tracks. You can regenerate part of the composition to make changes and interact with the system until you are satisfied with what has been generated. Of course, in this prototype, it's pretty bare, but in fact, we are now, so first, the system is the best there is right now in this area, and it's better and faster than most composer I know, and we're working now on deploying it in the industry with a lot more control for both amateur beginners that can't really make a composition or finish a composition themselves, as well as professionals that eventually might be able to work faster or create different things in more efficient ways using this particular system. And so we're working with the industry on deploying it. We have our own interface that we've been developing for it, but we're also working with Steinberg and with several other companies to deploy this in the industry and make plugins and integrate it into existing music software. And so what's interesting to us now is that this is going to change completely the way people compose. Beginners might be able to compose music that they can't compose otherwise, and professionals might work faster and better with those creative AI systems in the context of computer-assisted composition. And so we're now making studies to try to really see if composers find that the quality of what the system generates is good enough. Do they have enough control over what's being generated? Do they find that they can express themselves still through the use of the system? In the end, do they still feel that they're the author of the composition? Do they retain authorship, or they just find they've been collaborating with another musician, aka the system, and then it's a collaboration? Do they trust the system? Do they like the system? Or, are they afraid or amazed by the system? We're really interested in the actual experience. How does it feel to use those AI systems? And we want to do those studies before we deploy those systems in the world. First, because the companies want to know how their users are going to react, and also because it's a massive game changer for the entire creative industry to sort of automate partially the creative work there. So I'm using the system myself for making electronic music, but we also have a number of professional composers using the system right now, and we hope to release an album next year made using this type of system, as well as, of course, publishing the results of the different studies that we made using the system. So that's one example of computer-assisted creativity. I'll finish here by a short excerpt of an electronic music track that was generated recently using the system. All right. And so there's plenty of work done at the lab and throughout the world on this idea of computer-assisted creativity and augmenting existing interface to help the creative workers to create more efficiently or better content. We also work at the lab on computer-assisted sound design. Here it's a different type of system that allows to enter literally a description of a scene and then some emotional parameters, like, I want kids are playing in the park in an afternoon, windy afternoon, and then I want it to start happy and finish sad, and I want it to start calm and finish really eventful. And then the system is gonna produce literally an audio mix, finding background and foreground sound and adjusting them so as to respond to the request. And then you can import that as a sound designer, work with it, and or you can just render it and listen to it. If you don't like it, like for music generation, you just press generate again and it gives you another possible answer. And so here again, this is the system doing in a few clicks what would be a day, maybe 2 days of work. And so you can try a lot more different options. The system might not be as good as a human sound designer. We don't pretend it is, but it does a lot of the hard work that is needed, like finding the sounds, cutting them, putting them together. So that really we spend more time using our ears and our brain to decide what we want, as opposed to just do the manual work of clicking our way through in those software. That's another example of computer-assisted creativity, not for music composition, but in this case, using audio files and for sound design sort of composition. Here is an example of the output of the system. If you ask the system to generate the sound of a waterfall, a soundtrack for a waterfall in Thailand, it might sound like this. If you wanted to generate the soundscape for a city in the bush, it might sound like this. You can hear element of the city and the bush, and you can make requests. Of course, artists love to use and abuse those systems, use them as instruments and and push the limits. If you ask the system what a quenching rain drenched my burning head would sound like, it might sound like this. Oh, apparently this sound file is missing here. So this system is called Audio Metaphor, and you can find it online if you Google it and try it for yourself. Actually, there's an artwork version where you can just enter the sound and it gives you enter your request and it gives you the soundtrack. We've been working as well on style imitation and generation for visual art. We've been collaborating with Toronto-based company Generate that is minting NFTs right now for those who are interested in cryptocurrencies, the crypto world, and what's happening with the digital artwork and non-fungible tokens. So we've been doing deep learning for visuals as well in computer-assisted creativity, when people can manipulate the photo and generate visuals easily with those models in their hands. So that's computer-assisted creativity, interacting with those systems to generate content with less effort and in a more efficient way. And the second family of use of creative AI algorithm that is really on the rise right now is real-time embedded generative systems, in which the system is the algorithm is actually integrated into the system so as to provide an adaptive experience to the user. That means that in general, when you have any interactive system, whether it's game or education, you want to be keeping your user in what we call the flow zone. In other words, you want that the experience be not too hard to be discouraging and not too easy to be boring and disengaging. And that flow zone changes over time for everyone in different ways, and everyone is at a different place and different pace when it comes to the flow. Some people, would need a much harder experience quickly because they progress really quick. Some people will stagnate for a while, and if you give them more complex interaction, you will lose them. So in video games, it makes a lot of sense to generate the levels of the game according to a particular user, and we've been doing a lot of that at the lab, generating levels for video games that really are the right level of complexity and interaction for a particular user at a particular time. And of course, once we have generated levels for video games, it is tempting to generate content for those levels as well. For example, looking at the tension curve of a given level and generating music that follows that tension curve, so that the game is adapting to the player, and then the music is adapting to the player playing the game in real time. And that we have shown in a paper called Music Matters, that actually improves the immersion and put really the user in the flow zone so as to improve the quality. And that's really an example of real-time online embedded generative system, where you have to generate in real time because you don't know where the player is going to be ahead of time. Another area in which we work on real-time embedded generative systems are musical agents. And I will go through here. I won't show too many examples, but we use them into our artworks. And we just got a Best Paper award recently at the New Interface for Musical Expression. And here the idea is having musicians interact with musical agents, that is artificial musicians that can play with them in real time. When you rehearse and you want to play with your band, but no one else is available, this is convenient. When you're missing a band member, this is convenient for training purposes, but also for experimentation, this is convenient. So we're working on those musical agents. There's a long tradition of this type of work, but we have some of the state-of-the-art systems. So that's another example of real-time interaction. Some of those generative music systems work in real time as well in apps. I would point here as one application, which is the Allo app that generates soundscape and ambient music in real time, depending on your goal, whether you want to relax, you want to focus for work, and then depending on yourself and your preferences, it will learn what you like and what works for you and start generating the type of music and sonic ambience that puts you in the right mood for what you want to do at a given time. And so we really believe in having technology being not really adapting to the user, as opposed to the reverse, which is the normal way we work with technology now, where we learn the software and we adapt ourselves to the way the software works and not the other way around. We've been working on the domains. I'll just mention them in passing. We've been doing also online generation of movement, and we can control not only we can generate movement, but we can control in real time. This is a deep neural network generating skeleton 3D movement. Here is trained on actors in a motion capture studio, but what's fantastic is that once you have the model of several different movers and their movement signature, you can move here from one performer style to another performer style and generate thousands of styles in between those different styles, and therefore generate thousands of different identities and type of movements from just a few models, which means that instead of having to motion capture thousands of actors, you can just motion capture a few and generate many more styles of movement based on those few actors. So those applications here for the game industry, for the animation industry, for the film industry are important time and money saver. And those systems can be controlled by players in real time, and so they need to be sort of embedded and generating the movement in real time. And recently we've been working on dance generation as well, where we have those artificial agents dancing on music. That was actually an agent dancing in real time on actually generative music. And we've been working on generative video as well. I'll skip that part for the sake of time. But we have some documentation about the Autodium system on our website. And we just came back from an exhibition in Istanbul, actually, with that particular generative video system. So those systems, they exist, but are they good? And how are they perceived? And so already at the lab, we've been working on a lot of empirical studies and instruments to try to evaluate those meta-creative systems. It's hard to do because it's creative tasks. And typically for creative tasks, there's no such thing as an optimal solution. So we can't really compare to the best solution. And so a lot of empirical experiment with humans. And then we're also wondering, are people biased for or against the systems? Does it change something if you tell them? If you tell the audience this music is machine generated, will they like it more? Will they like it less? So we've been doing a number of experiments in that domain. There's actually 5 different experiments that have been done so far, 2 of them by our lab. And I have to say the results are not conclusive yet, and we need to do more work. And that's why there's sort of urgency to really assess before, we apply these creative AI systems everywhere across the board, spend more time and energy evaluating them. That's really what we're interested in. It's important because it's scientific research, but it's also important because as I hope I exemplified today, it has many actual applications, whether in computer-assisted creativity, where the creative workers are going to use those systems, and we're going to use the system to augment existing software pipelines for creative work, and also to enhance the experience of users by embedding those systems and those generative systems into interactive systems. And there's also all sorts of new types of creativity that are emerging from those systems and the way they exist. So what's happening is that there's all sorts of conferences, companies, startups, and all sorts of applications in preparation, be it with the Meta-Creation Lab or other labs that are leading in this in AI and machine learning applied to creative tasks. And of course, it raises fear because those 2 types of applications I talked about, augmenting existing software with creative AI and embedding creative AI within the experience, correspond exactly to the 2 paradigm of work automation that and the industrialization of society has brought forward about 100 years ago. And at the time, he already got people very fearful and scared. So those 2 paradigms are automation and augmentation. And of course, machinery in the industry is this idea of automation and sometimes augmentation when you need a human user there. And we had the exact same step with AI and machine learning nowadays. Back in the days, people were afraid. That's also true for artistic creativity. There was a lot of movement when in cinemas, actual musicians that were playing live the soundtrack of the movies were replaced by record players and automatic music playing. Then there was a lot of pushback at the time. But then, both in the case of machines, everyone used all sorts of machines for cooking, for cutting the grass, and for driving around nowadays without being offended by it. there's been an acceptability and an acceptance by society of those technology, as much as at the beginning there was fear and reject. And so right now, the statu quo is that creative tasks in practice is people spending a lot of time in front of computers and clicking one by one. It's like a click factory, one by one on button to get, this music, this animation, this film, whatever you have in mind, this graphic design done on the screen. And we believe we can do better, because right now it looks a bit like a click factory, those artistic / creative studio, and by embedding the AI system into the creative software, we really believe that that we can move forward and allow for different type of creative process to emerge in co-creative sort of dialogue between the AI system and the human user. So to conclude, technology has continually shaped us as humans, and I would like to think that we need to move away from the fears of AI taking over and believe a little bit into good design and do the work to work on the acceptability of those technology, evaluate them, and see where and when can they be really useful in the tradition of what's called anthropocentric instrumentalism, the idea that we humans get to devise the tools we feel we need at a given time. And so in that sense, AI is far from taking over. We are, as far as I know, very much in control. And so the computerization of society and the rise of autonomous machine has deep implication, yes, and there should be more dialogue around it, and there should be more political action and legislation around it. But I do believe the future is generative, and I hope that we should and could harness the power of machines to expand and support our creativity, and certainly not into replacing creative workers and pretending that machines are going to be able to really generate whatever creative assets we want to consume, because as far as I know, this is not something that is feasible right now. And so I want to disarm some of those fears as they occur. And that'll be my time for today. I want to thank all the collaborators and everyone involved. And if you want to know more about creative AI, there's online classes that are free on the Cadence platform that I strongly recommend. And I see Jennifer popping back in now, and I'm happy to take questions if there's any.
Yeah, we have about 2 minutes left. Thanks a lot for that. We spoke a lot about efficiency in the workplace, for example, when speaking about creating the music. And the question we had was, what is the impact, or what will be the impact of creative AI in education and workplace?
Well, I think this is going to be the next 10 years and 15 years of both research, and also what the industry is about to bring forward is going to be a lot of experimentation with new interfaces of how do we allow creative workers in the workplace to interact with AI in ways that is both productive in terms of creative output and in terms of efficiency of their work, but also in a way that is acceptable, that they don't feel that they're working for a machine, but more so that they're working with a machine, and that the machine allows them either to create differently or to create faster, whatever the case is. And in education, for the second part of the question, what's going to become increasingly important is for us to be able to teach the next generation of creative workers about those technologies and get them to demystify them and understand them. And that has to do with computational literacy. And I think in Canada and in the US, we're in good shape here with an understanding that, learning natural languages is very important, learning English and French, very important, but learning a programming language is becoming also equally important for preparing the workforce for tomorrow. It doesn't matter if you're going to program in your life or not. You should know how it works, because then it makes the computer less magic and therefore less scary, and much more, the dumb machine that it actually is, because computers are really not smart.
So would you say that you're like one of the main challenges in creative AI is educating people about it?
Absolutely, it's going to be key, and it's going to be key as well because we hope everyone is going to be citizen, and eventually politicians will have to make hard decision around the deployment of those technology, decisions that are going to have so many consequences on our lives, that it's important that everyone is educated so that they can vote and participate in those dialogues. I mean, for example, automation of driving, that's not a creative task, but that's very much on the plate with self-driving cars. Well, there's 6 million people in the US only that make a living out of driving a vehicle. what are we going to do with those people? So, we need to have the political conversation and the social economical conversation before we just jump on the technology and apply it. So that's really why it's important that there'll be more dialogue, and for dialogue to be constructive, as we learned harshly in the last few years, looking at social media and what's happening south of the border, for dialogue to be constructive, people need to be educated. Otherwise, it becomes nonsense very quickly.
Well, you've definitely given us a lot to think about. Thanks a lot for being with us. And I wish everybody a great rest of event.
Me too. Bye now.
Thank you. Bye.